Check it out. What is up? What is up? What's up, peeps? Word up. How's it going? It is April 1st. April Fool's Day. But there are no fools here, so we're not going to get hung up on that right now. And even though it is April Fool's Day, I'm not going to be making any April Fool's jokes or pranks in this video. And that's a promise. Of course, you don't know if that's true or not, but if I do make an April Fool's joke or prank, whatever you want to call it, in this video, it will be severely underwhelming because I'm not going to say anything that's going to be like, gasp. That's not the plan. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see. So, how's it going? I am excited to talk about a couple of things today, but before I get into those details, I want to tell you that I'm taking a bit of a slightly different tact moving forward with my wandering focus videos, where I try to lean a bit more on the focused side and a little away from the wandering side, be a bit more intentional with what I'm doing so that I can perhaps add a bit more value to you, both of you, who are here because you want to learn something from my process. And much like me, who wants to learn from my process, I find that there is quite a bit of muddy areas that you can just kind of get gummed up in and not get anywhere. As of, I don't know, a week ago, maybe a bit more, I finished the first complete draft of the fourth book in my series. The book is entitled The Gathering Grimm, and it is the fourth book in a projected 7-book series. And I'm pretty sure the book series will be 7 books, but there is always a bit of fluctuation and organic discovery in this process, which is one of the things that I want to talk about today. But here's what I want you to think about, and I've mentioned this in the past in another video. Book 4 is right in the middle of this series. I have the first 3 books that come before it, and there will be 3 books that come after it. This is the middle point of my series, and having finished the first complete draft of this book means that I am right there at the midway point of being finished with the entire series. Now, this is, obviously I'm not taking into account here that I have anthologies, and once everything is over, I intend to put some sort of compendium together of all the terms with some character sketches and you know, historical event overviews and things like that. Just fun stuff for the true dorks among us who nerd out on that kind of thing, which I tend to do. So, and also I'm a bit, probably not OCD. People say that they're OCD when they're not. For the sake of being thorough, I will have a nice compendium that ties all the elements together. And I don't think at this stage that I would plan to go back after the series is finished and write more installments, although there are always the possibility of me writing standalone novels that based on a character from the series or something else. But I'll be honest, I'm really excited to write something that isn't in the Glint and Shade series, and I have lots of plans. I actually have 2 different series that I'm working up in outlines and concepts that I'm excited to get to. So I do want to move on and write other things. I don't want to just be focused on this series for the rest of my life. As much as I love this series, I want to do it justice, and then I want to do other things. So being at the middle point of this series is super exciting, because that means I'm halfway finished. And there's bittersweet with that. I mean, there's a bittersweet moment in general. So when I finished the first draft of the 4th book, I was fairly emotional from that experience. one, just the accomplishment of knowing that the book is, it exists in a rough draft, and especially the final third of the book is a very rough draft at this point. And technically, I won't count this first draft finished until I'm ready to go back to the prologue in chapter 1 and begin editing the entire thing. And I have some work to do on the last third of the book before I do that. But for the purposes of this video, and based on the way anyone else would gauge it, I have finished the first draft. And there's this thrill of finishing it and having it together and knowing that now I can come and polish and work on all the fine-tuned details that I want to work on. I think the most of my emotional reaction to finishing the draft in this particular case was more a response to the characters. I've been with these characters now for 4 books and an anthology, and so I love them. Some of these characters have been with me for, a decade or longer. Actually, some of these characters have been with me since 2001. So, but it's very exciting and it's thrilling for me to get these character stories on the page and to see it come together in a way that I feel does justice to them, because I care about my characters. I love them and I want to honor them with the stories that I'm writing. So, because it's their stories more than it's my story. And I realize that that's kind of being a bit woo-woo, but still, that's how I feel. So it was an emotional reaction. There was a bit of an emotional excitement over knowing that I'm halfway through the series, and also, oh no, I'm halfway through this series. There is another thing, though, that is really exciting about this particular book, and that is that this turns the story. It marks a real turning point in the story. So up until this point, we've had books that were very intimate in scope and very focused on a character or a small group of characters. And that group of characters has grown with each book, but we've still maintained a fairly focused and contained story. And we've hinted at the larger world and the things that are going on that are escalating issues, things that will become serious problems soon enough. And in book 4 is when we finally tie up all of these individual stories enough to turn our full focus on the horizon and these new horrors, the Gathering Grim, as it is referred to in the 4th book, what is coming. And it sets us up for, so not only are we beginning to look at a more epic scale in terms of the conflicts and the story, but we're also beginning to look at what our final antagonists for the series are going to be. And we've done a lot of groundwork and prep for getting to this place, but there is something about finally having our characters in a place where they are ready to take on these bigger issues. And because they're ready, we get to go with them. Because that is something that I was very intentional about from the beginning, is that the story that you or I read when we pick one of these books up is, we don't know anything other than what our characters know. And so I don't write in an omniscient narrator voice. There are a couple of places, interludes, prologues, and epilogues, where I will give myself a bit more flexibility with those. But for the rest of the book, I am always, every single scene is written from a character's point of view, and we never have any point of view that is outside of a character's point of view. We can draw inferences. We can come to conclusions that may differ from what our characters believe, especially since we have multiple character point of views. But everything that we're being told is filtered through this character's perspective, which means that they are in some way diluting or manipulating or altering that reality in some way, because it's being filtered through their understanding and their perspective, just like in the real world. If you ask me what I think about the last movie I saw in theaters was Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey Part 2. Don't ask me why. If you ask my opinion about that movie, I would tell you, and I would state it as a fact. I thought the movie was, it looked better than it had any right to. Even though it was very, very dark, I would argue that it was too dark. And I mean, in the actual cinematography, it was too dark to really see what was going on. The actors in this movie were far better than they had any right to be. I mean, that, like, I couldn't believe it. That never once did I feel like I was watching bad acting. The writing could have been improved. The editing could have been improved. I laughed the entire time because I don't think it's supposed to be taken seriously, and it didn't scare me, although it did gross me out because it is gory as heck. All of that is my opinion, but I stated all of that as if it's fact. This is this movie. This is how you will feel if you go into it, but you will feel completely differently than me, right? And you understand that. You're asking for my opinion. You can have your own opinion about those things, and you would state your own opinion, and we would understand that as we're stating our opinion or our perspective, it's being filtered through our own experiences. The same thing with our characters. When we're hearing these characters and the characters is telling us this is happening, we know that that's what the character sees, that's what they perceive, but it's being filtered through all of their perceptions. And that was a distinct choice I made at the beginning, was to write in that style, because I want us to be anchored to the characters. And even as the scope kind of broadens, opens up into larger vistas and a more epic scale story and challenges, I always want it to be anchored to my characters, the stories to be anchored to the characters and feel that intimacy. And so everything else is being experienced through that intimate lens of our individual characters. I said that the last third of this book is going to require a good bit of cleaning up and polishing or editing before I feel like it is really finished. It's close. It's close to being a completed first draft for me, but there are a few things that I want to do moving forward, just to clean it up and tighten up some of the points here and there, and make sure that I didn't start an idea, introduced a conflict, introduced a question, and I didn't give you an appropriate answer if it should have been answered in this manuscript, because a lot of questions aren't going to be answered in this manuscript, which if you are still here and you've read any of my books, you would know that. Both of you. So, normally I write from a very detailed outline. I'm going to say that the last books were around 20 pages, the outlines going into that. This one was, I'm gonna say around 23, 24 pages, but I can't remember precisely what that number is. But it is a very detailed outline. As I write a book, even with a very detailed outline, there is a ton of discovery in that process. It's a very organic process, and I realized that I had tagged a specific scene in my outline to have a specific emotion, a character to feel a certain thing or to have a certain suspicion or whatever. But by the time I get to writing that scene in the manuscript, I know more about what led to that and the growth of our characters. So in that process, I deviate from the outline, and sometimes I deviate significantly from the outline. And that is one of the things that happened in this fourth book. Is in the middle third of the book, I deviated. There was something that I wanted to reveal to a character that needed to be revealed to a character, and in the outline, that was not going to happen until the third act of the book. But I realized at this point in the middle of the book that I had to reveal it to this character then, because if I didn't, it would not make sense why no one had told him this. So that was something that came out of the writing process that I realized, oh, this needs to happen. Also, when I put it in the outline, that just seemed like a logical place for it. So when writing, I realized, nope, there's a more logical place for it. In fact, that place in the outline is illogical. So I moved it and changed significant chunks of the third act of this book. But the other thing was the third act of the book was the least developed, because there were questions that I needed to answer that I couldn't quite answer without writing the story up to that point. So going into the third act, I spent a week or two reading through the outline and just thinking, all right, so how am I going to deal with kind of reformatting this, restructuring it? There were lots of gaps, lots of holes, not a lot going on. It was basically, point, climax, and I needed something between those points, and I knew that there was content there, but my outlining brain just couldn't find what those points were. So I made a choice that rather than redeveloping that final third of the outline, I knew I wanted this to happen, and later I wanted this to happen, and it leads to this happening over here. But how all of those things happened, I was just going to write and do more of a free flow type of writing process rather than an outlining process. And that was a lot of fun. It was also challenging and kind of terrifying, because the reason I like to work from a very detailed outline is because I am planning, like I said, this is a 7-book series, and with page 1, book 1, I was already planting seeds for books 6 and 7. And I want to make sure that I have all of those things, layers figured out, and am doing them justice, because nothing drives me crazier than to have someone write a book or a screenplay for a TV series or a movie or whatever, and they only have that vision. They may have broad ideas for the rest of a series, but they're writing let's just say a movie script. They're writing a script for a movie. They've gotten one movie approved that they can make, and they're focused on that. And then after that, they want to build a world around this story, and they didn't flesh out all of the details. They don't know exactly what's happening. I don't want my stories to begin to become threadbare or feel like they're going to fall apart later in the series because I wasn't confident of all of the details and how all these things fit together and what we're going toward. So that's why I prefer really strong outlines. But there is something really tangibly fun and interesting and exciting about writing more of a free flow thing. And I could do it in the last third of this book because everything was so well established, because 2/3 of the book had been written, that going into that final third, I knew what the characters were feeling, I knew where they were going, and I knew what was happening, but I didn't know, all right, so how are they going to get to this specific spot for this specific bit of action to happen? Because there was this thing that we needed to do, and I wasn't sure how I was going to get it there. That came out very easily and very naturally and organically in writing it, putting it on the page. But that does mean that the back end of that means going back in and making sure that I didn't start any thoughts that I didn't finish. I didn't ask any questions that I meant to answer in this manuscript and didn't. So that's why there's a bit more polishing. So that would be the case with a free flow writing process, more so than with a detailed outline. The next step would be, once I've got this last third is written, then I would go back into from the very beginning and edit the entire manuscript, and my primary focus then would be the goals, motivations, and conflicts of the characters. Those things exist very well and well formed in my mind, very three-dimensional, very fleshed out in my mind, and when I'm writing, that's the way I'm writing, but I don't necessarily write so that those goals, motivations, and conflicts are clearly defined for my reader. And I don't want to spell it out, because you read the body language of people you see at work and at school and the grocery store, wherever, every single day of your life, you read those nonverbals, you read tone, you read all of that stuff. I want you to read the same thing into my characters to understand where they're coming from, what they're feeling, and what they're thinking to some extent. But I also don't want to hide what their goals, motivations, and conflicts are. So it is a balance. It's like showing versus telling. There's a balance between the two. I have to know when to show and when to tell. I have to know when to trust the reader and let the reader discover these goals, motivations, and conflicts on their own, and when I need to clarify them just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So that's the second stage of this editing process, when I will take the full manuscript and I will really hone in on those three things and other things as well, and just the story itself. Every pass of editing will be to kind of polish and fine tune it, but that's when I really begin to focus on the craft of writing in such a way that I'm partnering with my reader and giving my readers what they want. The first draft is my attempt to get the story on the page, and I'm really writing that draft mostly just for myself. The second draft is when I really begin to think about my readers and making sure that they can experience the story with the same delight and joy and expectation and whatever other emotions you want to think of as I do. So we're at an exciting point. We are halfway through, and yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled and ecstatic, and I'm glad that both of you are here and watching my video. And so if you have questions, leave them in the comments. Shoot me an email. You can head to my website, eric@ericshanelove.com is my website. Is my email address. ericshanelove.com is my website. And yeah, ask me some questions and let me know your thoughts. Also, I reward people who review my books, and I'm trying to get a club, a group of reviewers who review my books on Amazon, Goodreads, wherever you review books, and I give ARC copies or free ebooks of the other books in exchange for the review of the last book. So I have some information about that on my website you can check out, and I'm also going to be putting together a video today actually to talk about that in more detail. So check that out as well. And in the meantime, I hope that you were enjoying your spring, and that spring is wonderful, and as everything comes to life outside and around you, that you can experience the same kind of internal growth and freshness that we see outside. And I would encourage you to think just maybe of one thing in your life that has come to feel a little bit stale, and look for some interesting ways to change it up, to add a bit of life into that place. Learn something new. Go on YouTube, find a tutorial to learn how to do something you've wanted to learn how to do. Maybe you wanted to learn how to use Photoshop. Go on YouTube, there's tons of tutorials on Photoshop. So many tutorials on Photoshop. Or plant a garden. Or, learn to cook something that you love to order in a restaurant and have never thought to cook at home. Just do something new. Add a bit of spice and flavor to your life. And mostly, as always, take care of yourselves, stay creative, do what you love, and don't let the tedious aspects of whatever you're doing rob you of the joy that activity brings you. Peace out, Girl Scout, Boy Scout, whatever. Scouts of any gender. So I don't want to necessarily communicate the gummed up areas as much as I just want to be a straight shooter. I don't know why I did that.